A lot has changed in 2022, and I wanted to get a recruiter or recruiter's perspective on everything that's going on. So I invited two veteran recruiters, of course, Braden Boex and Adam Lay, here to join us this week. Atlas All Access starts now. All right. Braden, you've been here before. Adam, this is your first time here. So I really want to understand how the role of the recruiter has changed this year so far. And now we'll get into other we'll move that time frame out a little bit. But so far this year, like what's happening right now and how has that changed from your typical recruiter experience, like your recruiter, your job description?
Well, I mean, I think that we're seeing the reset in the market that we've talked about this a number of times, and I think we've expected it to happen 3 or 4 times already, and it just hadn't happened. And I think we finally hit a tipping point with a lot of hospitals, and I think that the CFOs are tired of, I guess, drinking themselves to sleep at this point. I think that a lot of hospitals are trying to finally get some sort of control over their finances.
Right.
And I think that, the first step is they have to either reduce the number of travelers that they are paying the rates that they've been paying for the last 2 years, or in order to maintain the staffing levels that they need to also function as a hospital, they have to start reducing rates.
Sure.
So I think that we're in the middle of seeing that reset now.
I assume you're feeling the same thing.
Yeah, and I knew we all knew this reset was coming, but I think it came a lot quicker than people wanted, and I think COVID dropped off a lot faster than people expected.
Did we really anticipate another variant? Like, I really thought we might have seen something else here going into the spring and summer. And it doesn't seem like that's happening necessarily. But then you hear stories about Shanghai is shut down again, and there are other parts of the world that are shutting down or reinstituting mask mandates and that type of thing. Do you see that? Do you anticipate that for us?
I doubt it. Honestly, I think that the United States is, just as a country and as a whole, for the most part, I think that everybody's starting to kind of take the Midwestern approach to it of, COVID's not that big a deal anymore, and we're tired of adjusting for it. So I think even if we do see variants, I think that it's going to be really, really hard for local areas to walk back to mask mandates, to any sort of anything that could be interpreted as a lockdown or anything like that.
Interesting.
I think it's part of our life and lifestyle going forward, and there will be flare-ups here and there.
Mm-hmm. Does it become like the flu? Like we have to every year in the fall we deal with the flu shot or flu declinations or whatever. Is it the same thing? Do you think that's what it is?
I mean, at this point, a shot in the fall is better than people feeling like they're being cooped up anymore. So
all right.
maybe it is, and I think that there's a lot of people that have, we've got the vaccine, we've got a second shot, we've got boosters. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that are just, the stats probably don't support it, but I think a lot of people feel that they've done their part, so to say.
And we're going to live with what we've got.
Yep.
At that point.
The dice have been cast.
Sure.
I think the big difference is social media these days and what a role that's going to play in it, because it loves the headlines of a COVID flare-up.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, so let me ask, I'm going to start with you on this one. You've been a recruiter for quite some time. You're new to Atlas, but you've been a recruiter for quite some time. How has it changed, like, in the past year? So think back to about where we were this time last year. What sort of things are you doing maybe that are different that you hadn't done or that you weren't doing last year?
I mean, hospitals and health systems were living in such panic and crisis at the time, so matches were easier. It was easier to match nurses to jobs. Because of the reset that's happening right now, it's harder to find those jobs. There's less jobs at the moment during a reset
Yeah.
And so they'll start to roll out a little bit more here in the next month or two.
All I have is like anecdotal evidence or whatever of how many placements how many submittals it's taking you to get a placement.
Yeah.
Where are you at on that? Like, what are you seeing?
What used to be, 3 to 5 submissions to get a placement is now 20 to 30.
Same. Are you at the same place?
Yeah, I mean, I used to submit to one job, and then now we're 5, 10, 15 shots, and I mean even sometimes at the same hospital, just as jobs open and close.
Interesting. Yeah. So it has changed dramatically here over the past year. All right. So now, next question. Go pre-pandemic for me. Let's take a step further back because we know it's considerably different now to be a recruiter than it was back then. Give me some advice. Like, what would you say to a new recruiter coming in who hadn't experienced that before?
On the same line, so that used to be 8 to 10 submissions probably at the time pre-COVID, so still competitive. But now it's a lot more customer service based and building relationships. I think that's the most important thing.
Which was always kind of the basis of what we were here, right?
Yeah.
So same with you, I assume.
Yeah, very similar. So I think that a lot of newer recruiters or, a lot of people that are new to traveling in general, I think that's something that everybody's kind of forgotten just because COVID has been so fast paced the last couple of years too, is there's a slowdown in the spring, early summer anyway. I mean, this isn't new.
Right.
It's just really dramatic because we haven't dealt with it in 2 years. But I mean, I think that this is a very painful shift back to not business as usual. I don't think we'll ever go back pre-COVID. I don't think that we'll ever be able to get back to pre-COVID rates. Like hospitals won't be able to get nurses to come work for them because nurses, travelers have seen there is more out there. So in order to remain competitive, but I think we're getting back into a normal pattern.
Well, and I've had this conversation too with banks recently as we try to forecast for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, that type of thing. And one of my favorite new phrases is you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? There are hospitals out there that hadn't used contract staff before that are now using contract staff and understanding how this is a benefit to them, how it's helping their staffing needs. They can't just all of a sudden go back to the way they were before and say, sorry, we're not using travelers anymore. It's just not going to happen. So then how do you as recruiters work with that? Understanding there's going to be a slowdown and a pullback, but at the same time, maintaining those relationships and finding those right situations for each one of your travelers.
I mean, I just think that right now, I think there's a couple of things that travelers need to consider, and I think as recruiters that we are all considering. One of the big things is if you're staff and you're considering traveling, we're having to have a lot of fairly upfront conversations with travelers about why they want to travel. And you and I have talked about this several times, but people really need to be in touch with why they want to travel, because if it's for the money, great. I don't want to say it's running out, but it's getting harder to find because more people are, as rates change, they're leaving positions, assuming that they can find something else. It's extremely competitive. So if you want to travel for the adventure, if you want to travel for location, if you want to travel for those reasons, it makes it a lot easier because you're less worried about what the market is doing. And then your only real worry is working with a recruiter that you trust to submit to those 8 to 10 to 15 positions, and then you take a good one when it comes along.
I was going to say the same thing, but a lot of times maybe we're only able to meet two of their 3 priorities.
Sure.
And we call that a win these days.
Well, quite honestly, that was a win pre-COVID days too, right? I mean, that's how it used to be, quite honestly. So let me ask you this. Based on what Braden just said, is there still a world for those perm nurses who maybe are still perm right now that are considering travel to still be a traveler?
Absolutely. The most flexibility and open the more open they can be on where they go is what's going to be successful.
Sure. Okay. All right. So now I want you to get the crystal ball, right? Because I don't know what's going to happen. We've got a pretty good guess of what's going to happen next quarter, the quarter after that type of thing. Where do you think by the end of the year, where do you think things are going to end up? Needs, open jobs, bill rates.
I think I like the bill rates one because that's the one I feel probably most comfortable talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we've seen a lot of bill rates for the last 2 years in the 150 to 175, all the way up to like $200 range.
Yep.
Those same jobs pre-COVID were 75 to 80 to, like, if we got $100, that was just, God among men.
100 was mind-blowing. Yes.
I think that we're going to see a shift, not all the way back down to 75 to 100. I think we're going to see a shift. Those jobs that were 75 to 100, those are going to be 100 to 120. I think we're going to see a lot of $3,000 a week jobs, which was, again, mind-boggling prior to COVID, but it's a pretty abrupt change to people that have been making 4 to 5.
Yep.
Coming into winter, I'm hoping that ICU bounces back. That's been the hardest thing to place right now. Is if you're ICU, it used to be we sent out one ICU profile, and we had 5 hospitals asking for them.
Exactly.
Now it's hard to place ICU. It's almost impossible right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, to say another way is when travel rates stretched the bill rates so high, it brought the bottom up to a very good level. What nurses deserve. I mean, and then to speak to the staffing part of it, I think in a few months we're going to be rolling again pretty steadily. So you said by the end of the year, I think we'll find a normal by then. I still think there's going to be a lot of nurses retiring or burned out or moving to other careers, and that'll open up so many jobs for travelers.
I believe that's true as well. I also think, and we avoided it last year, and I'm pretty sure I'm on record here last year saying flu season is going to suck this year. Like, we are going to get hit hard. We're not wearing masks. We're back out in public or whatever. But then all of a sudden, summer hits, Delta hits, Omicron hits, and we're not doing that again. Well, that's not happening now, and we're going back to concerts and back to whatever, casinos and things like that. We're taking vacations, getting on airplanes. I think the flu season is going to come back, and it's going to come back hard. And I believe that's where you're going to see some of those ICU rates increase again. We're going to see longer stays in hospitals because of that. Now, I'm guessing. This is just a guess. But I've been through 18 flu seasons so far in my career as in healthcare staffing, and I've seen some very difficult ones, and I've seen some easier ones. I believe the easier ones are a thing of the past. I think we're going to get hit pretty hard this year.
I think there's a couple of things that are really going to be the determining factors, though, in how quickly we shift back to normal. One of those is going to be how many nurses and how many travelers end up changing jobs. I mean, burnout is very real. We've seen it happen, and I think that we continue to be at the end of a lot of nurses' ropes in terms of what they can handle.
Yeah,
I think. So that we're going to see a lot of people leaving the industry, healthcare. And then I'll be interested to see where hospitals end up with. A lot of them took their staff leaving to go travel when they needed them. They took that pretty hard. And I'll be interested to see what policies, what lists of like non-rehirables suddenly get reviewed when they realize, well, we can't get the travelers, and we, our staff wants to come back. Maybe we need to review some uncomfortable conversations we had when they left.
Right.
So I think that those, how those two topics, how they kind of land, I think that's going to determine how long this bumpy period also gets.
And what's going to
out.
fuel the backside of that is students coming in, but neither will be enough to keep hospitals fully staffed.
True.
Well, and we've talked about this a couple of times too, is students, a lot of people are going into nursing programs with, it used to be a career. Like I'm nursing until I retire. Nursing is now, it's for a lot of people, it's a stepping stone into advanced degrees.
Sure.
So
we
might start getting some reprieve from new students, but for how long?
The life is shorter.
Correct. Yep, exactly. That is an awesome segue. Didn't even ask for that one. Into industry news. just this week, and I read it this morning. A couple different recruiters actually sent me this article, and I saw it on the news yesterday because I still kind of watch the evening news, sometimes local news here.
It's really rude.
It wasn't you this time, actually. You've called me multiple times during this before. A health system here in Omaha announced they are creating an internal travel nurse staffing agency or arm to their staffing pool. And they're going to allow their perm nurses to travel within their own, within that company, within that own
Health system.
Health system, right. And then come back to their home. So if they want to see what traveling is like, but not necessarily leave them, they can still have that opportunity. Now, what's the bones of that look like? We don't know, because we only saw the sanitized portion that they gave to us through a news article. Does it include per diem? Does it include housing? Does it include any of those things that we would normally include for a travel nurse? I don't know. But they're experimenting. They're trying because they realize, much like you said, this is the new normal. And they're going to have maybe some of those tough conversations internally. Do we take these travelers back? What do we do to stop this from happening in the future? What's the happy medium here? And I think this is kind of what they've landed on. Actually had one of our longtime travelers, one of your travelers actually, came to me and asked me, who is working perm now, by the way. She asked me, I've heard systems are doing this. Oh. Should I be worried? And my answer was no, but you should definitely look into it. Mm-hmm. This is another option for you down the road. If you want to explore this, there's nothing wrong with that. This is just a new part of the new normal that I think we have to get used to. And it's part of the new normal that I think we're going to get used to. If some point they come to us, and we actively staff this system right now. If they come to us and ask us for help, our answer is going to be yes. We will fit into whatever mold you ask us to fit into, and then start adding travelers to that pool for you. So I think that's just an interesting move towards whatever new normal is.
I had a long conversation with another traveler of mine who was referred by the traveler that you're referring to about that same hospital. I like the idea. I'm shocked it's taken this long. I mean, we've seen hospital systems like Banner. They do the same thing, and they've done it for years. Mm-hmm. I think that this is less like a travel nursing type thing within the system, and this almost feels like more they're trying to take advantage of like the gig economy, like Uber and things like that. Because my conversation from some of the perks that came from that hospital is you got to hire. You paid more. You could get stipends, but it was all based on distance, so it wasn't necessarily like maxed out stipends. And if you were closer than 50 miles, which in Omaha, like if you want to be outside of 50 miles, you're way out there.
Sure.
So you're not necessarily getting stipends. You're not eligible for benefits. I'll be interested to see as hospitals develop these programs where the benefits are, because traveling with us, you get 401k match, you get health insurance, you get your taxes, things like that.
Right.
If the hospitals try and just catch people with higher pay, thinking that that's the only benefit to travel nursing, I'll be interested to see just how quickly they're disappointed.
Yeah, I agree.
And help with compliance is going to be an interesting one.
Right? I mean, there's a whole other section of that. There's a cost center to the travel nurse that we take on that the hospital doesn't, that they don't have to if they hire a travel nurse. Now, if they're running that agency internally, they're taking on all of those costs. Benefits, compliance costs, any of those things. I think they're going to understand very quickly, look, there's agencies exist for a reason. Now, that leads me into just my opinion. I'm trying to find the easiest, most polite way to say this. The squeeze is happening right now, right? We're feeling that squeeze happening right now. I saw it on the travel nurse newbies group that's run by Kay Slane, that a number of nurses who work for smaller agencies having a very difficult time. And I think we're only going to see that increase. Now, I don't say this because, okay, we're a larger agency. We're surrounded by other larger agencies, maybe here in Omaha. Now, there are smaller agencies here that I know are feeling the squeeze too. It's going to be much easier for a travel nurse to travel with an agency who has been established for quite some time rather than one that maybe has just popped up recently or maybe has new ownership and has just, or new blood somehow along the way and all of a sudden has an increased headcount, but they don't necessarily have those contracts.
Braden and I hear about those struggles from new travelers all the time when they're getting pushed or canceled with those other agencies.
I think that's an absolute real thing.
Well, I mean, this is, again, we've had this conversation before where we had it when COVID was ramping up and OR jobs were getting canceled and PACU jobs were getting canceled, and the vendors who also had recruiting arms, they kept the jobs for themselves. And so we're seeing the exact opposite of that, or I guess not the opposite. We're seeing the exact same thing on the exit side of this, this change in the market where ICU jobs and med-surg jobs, things like that, they're probably going to be held by the bigger agencies. And the agencies that have those relationships are going to, just like before, they're going to be more likely to get you the jobs because they have access before a lot of the smaller agencies do.
Right. There was just a scenario recently within the past couple of days, actually, where one of our very established travelers who left and went to a smaller agency has come back to us now on an extension because they said, "I'm sorry, we can't work with the smaller agencies anymore. You have to go back to Atlas." Quite honestly, and now look, she was very happy to come back. It worked out fine, but was I surprised to hear that at all? No, and I think we're only going to hear more and more situations like that as this goes on. Now, is there another variant that hits in the summer? What does the fall look like? Is the flu season going to be as hard as I thought it was going to be? I don't know, but that's every day it changes. Every day something is different here. Every day I walk in the door and I think, okay, what is it going to look like today? How are we going to have to evolve and adapt in order to stay relevant here? And you guys are right on the front line of that.
I'm evolving. My fingers are lengthening, like physically. My heightened senses. I'm a velociraptor of recruiting.
That's a soundbite right there. A velociraptor of recruiting.
I might get it changed on the website.
Well, I don't know about that. So
y'all can't stop me from changing my email sign-offs.
You're absolutely right about that. All right. Braden, Adam, thank you so much. It was awesome for you to join me here. So if you have any questions, especially if you're a permanent nurse thinking about traveling, it's still a good time to do it. We have resources here that you can talk to. If you're on a contract right now and you're not sure what's happening out in the environment, again, we have recruiters that you can talk to. All right? We'll see you next week.